to another episode of Rock Boys Football Dill. Kalen DeBoer, Alabama, heading up to Camp Randall to play the Wisconsin Badgers. And, as just a pure college football fan, I don't know if this is the best college football game we're going to see on Saturday, although I think it's certainly up there. I think more importantly, this is a unique matchup that is certainly going to have my attention at noon on Saturday. I want to get into, I think, a few key matchups and a few key players to look for in this football game. Obviously, give our picks and predictions. I look at this Alabama team and say, yeah, it was sloppy Saturday night, right? 13 penalties for 120 yards, 3 turnovers. You still won 42-16. And I still think you saw some positive things from that Alabama team. Now, we're going to get to what needs to be cleaned up. And then you look at Wisconsin. They haven't played great football the first 2 weeks. I think a lot of Wisconsin fans would certainly say that as well, but you got the job done. I think both of these teams want to play better football going into this week 3 matchup. Excited to get into it now. Before we do, and as always, most importantly, let it fly in the comment section. A little Big Ten SEC rivalry. I know a lot of fans are going to look at this game a lot of different ways. That's the beauty of doing these game picks and predictions. So let it fly in the comment section, whether you agree with the boys, whether you disagree. Dill, we're putting our Big Ten bias aside right here, taking a look at this game. And without further ado, let's get into this one. And let's start with this Alabama offense where let's get into what needs to clean up, but needs to be cleaned up, excuse me. But before, I do want to shout out something that stood out to me. And that is, it seemed like Jalen Milroe was a little bit more comfortable attacking that short intermediate part of the football field. One of my big knocks on Jalen Milroe is, yeah, he throws a beautiful deep ball. He's one of the best in the country at throwing the deep ball, but at times was a little over-reliant on throwing the deep ball. And if it wasn't there, normally this Alabama offense would struggle. It wasn't necessarily there on Saturday night. I thought he worked the short intermediate portions of the football field, quite well. And I think for Alabama fans, yeah, there's a lot of things that need to be fixed coming out of Saturday night. That's probably one of the positive takeaways you're coming away from that football game.
And when he got the chance is kind of what I would make as the focal point is when he got the chance to just run that offense smoothly. I thought they were moving the ball the way you wanted to see it. The obvious issue is they were constantly in 2nd and 20 or 3rd and 26, just ridiculous down and distances, obviously caused by far too many holdings from that offensive line. And that'll be kind of what I'm looking for against this Wisconsin team is can they get that unit gelling a little bit more? And you saw that by the end of the game. I mean, that's vintage Alabama.
Yes.
That's running the ball physically. That's opening up big holes, hitting big plays off the run. And if they give those running backs space, I mean, Haynes and Jalen Milroe are so good. I thought they ran the ball incredibly well. Again, it's just, to me, it's going to be about that offensive line gelling and especially just kind of getting that right tackle spot figured out in a sense. When Elijah Pritchett came in, I thought he did look like he was playing better football. Obviously, I know he's working through some injuries, but once they get that starting tackle kind of rotation and Cade Proctor back, I think this Alabama team.
Yeah, because we know the inside of the offensive line is freaking awesome. I'm kind of with you, and we've seen this happen a few other times with some other teams. I think Oregon's another really good example where you have an injury go down on the offensive line. You're kind of shuffling the deck a little early in the season, and then it's kind of throwing off the whole offensive line as a whole. I think you're seeing that a little bit with Alabama as Caden Proctor gets back healthy. Pritchett, look, Formby obviously struggled. I'm not out on the kid, but it certainly wasn't good enough against USF on Saturday night. If they can fix the offensive line, that's a massive story. And one of the things that I'm thinking about is, Kalen DeBoer, there was going to be some growing pains with him and Nick Sheridan, how they want this offense to look, because I don't think he's used to having an offensive line that can move bodies off the line of scrimmage. And I think at a certain point yesterday in that football game, he kind of realized, yeah, I got an offensive line that can move bodies. I got 2 really good running backs in the backfield. Why don't we lean on that? And quite frankly, you look at Wisconsin, they haven't played great competition in Western Michigan and South Dakota, but you dive into the film, it's not like they are dominating along the lines of scrimmage, specifically on the defensive side of the football. I'm looking for Alabama to go on the road. What's the best way to deal with the hostile environment that you're going into? Quiet the crowd by establishing a run game, which I think Alabama has a good shot at doing.
I think you're right. I think that's where Alabama, wants to commit to being really physical. I think they have a really good chance to kind of get rolling on this Wisconsin.
Agreed.
You kind of said it. I mean, with James Thompson getting injured earlier in the season, that's a huge loss for an already kind of thin defensive tackle position, I'd say. So I think, again, you kind of said it. You look at Western Michigan, they were kind of pounding the ball a little bit. Obviously, Wisconsin would be able to get their negative plays and kind of put a stop to those drives. But at the end of the day, like down in, down out, they just weren't playing good enough. They're not playing physical enough, and they're not a huge defensive line, I should say. So this Alabama offensive line, I would really be surprised if they don't commit to this run being really, really physical and trying to figure out if Wisconsin can deal with that and get their linebackers rolling and get some other group that can make some things happen. Because I just don't see any way that this Wisconsin defensive line.
And I look at that and say, if you do get the run game going and Wisconsin starts putting some safeties into the box, then you can unlock Jalen Milroe working vertically down the field to guys like Ryan Williams. Now, on the flip side here, what does Wisconsin need to do to stop Alabama? One, it's obviously keep Jalen Milroe in the pocket. We all know when Jalen Milroe doesn't necessarily, when he's kind of forced to process from the pocket, that is sometimes where he can struggle. And I think secondly, I wouldn't say it's an over-reliance on Ryan Williams because the kid's a freak, but Ryan Williams has accounted for over half of the total passing yards that Jalen Milroe has thrown for. You got a really good cornerback at Wisconsin, Ricardo Holman, who maybe can kind of take Ryan Williams out of the game or at least try to neutralize Ryan Williams to some sort of extent. If I'm Wisconsin, I'm trying to put hands on Ryan Williams. This kid is freaky. Like, I mean, you look at the first two games, this kid should be a senior in high school, and he's dominating for Alabama as a true freshman. One of the big questions we have is, all right, how is he going to deal with hands on him? A little physicality. And that's kind of what I'm looking at for Wisconsin. Keep Jalen Milroe in the pocket and seeing if you could take away Ryan Williams. Both of those, much easier said than done. But if you're Wisconsin trying to stop this Alabama offense, those are probably the two keys to this football game.
And one big thing I think you're looking for, if you can kind of let your cornerbacks kind of operate a little bit on islands, if you will, I think that allows you to get Hunter Waller, their star safety, playing a little bit more in the box, playing around the line of scrimmage, and also playing the middle of the field. Because I think that's another spot I look at. If Wisconsin's going to pull this upset off, they probably need him to make a play. They need Pressman to make a play. Those safeties are really instinctual. I think that's an underrated part of this Wisconsin defense. I think they have to turn the ball over probably at least twice if they're going to beat this Alabama team. So they can't have those guys being forced to just kind of sit back and just work over the top on those freaky wide receivers you kind of mentioned. I think they need to be able to play around the line of scrimmage, need to be able to be involved and make some high impact plays. Because again, looking at what this Wisconsin defense is up front, especially in that interior defensive line, they'll have their work cut out for them just stopping this Alabama team consistently. I think they need to turn it over. Jalen Milroe's made some turnover-worthy play, not so much this year, but last year he was doing it. So again, can they tap into that and try to make something happen? Because I don't see them consistently stopping this Alabama.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Just a little bit outmanned in terms of the trenches. Let's flip over to this Wisconsin offense where a key for this Wisconsin offense, and it's really going to be a key for this Wisconsin offense pretty much throughout 2024. Can Phil Longo scheme it up for Tyler Van Dyke? Like, we all know Tyler Van Dyke has a hose on him, one of the more talented arms really in the country. What Tyler Van Dyke really struggles with is processing and kind of going through reads. So if you're Phil Longo, you need to simplify the football game for Tyler Van Dyke. And I think secondly, move Will Pauling around and really give this Alabama secondary a lot of different looks, because it's a new secondary, whether it's transfers, whether it's a true freshman and Xavier Brown. These guys haven't played a ton of football together. Can Phil Longo give some different route concepts, give some different looks to Wisconsin, try to get some busting coverages and kind of hit some explosive plays to that deeper third? Because like you said, on the defensive side of the football, I think it's the same thing for the offense. I don't see Wisconsin driving the football 15 plays, 80 yards, and scoring on Alabama very consistently. But what I can see Wisconsin doing is maybe trying to hit some explosive plays against a secondary that hasn't played much football together, because you got a quarterback that can make those kind of throws.
And you saw Bama give a little bit of that up. I mean, there were some chances USF had to hit some big-time explosive pass plays, and they obviously missed them. But again, if Wisconsin can capitalize on a couple of those and get a good matchup with Will Pauling, or even look for a guy like Trek Kahuna, I mean, that was another thing you saw a little bit of issues with. Xavier Brown gave up a couple of plays deep. I think there were, again, some plays that USF had. Can they go put a really fast Trek Kahuna, a guy who Wisconsin hasn't necessarily used a ton of yet, but we know has some real talent and ability to work vertically. So I'm kind of with you. At the end of the day, they can't have the ball sitting in Tyler Van Dyke's hands too long. That's going to be a huge problem. He's already shown some signs of making some of those plays at Miami that really.
Yep, I agree. And if you're Alabama, like one of the big question marks we had about Alabama is, all right, you lose. I mean, obviously Will Anderson 2 years ago and Dallas Turner. Can you have the dogs up front? I think
I
they
think
do.
Quandarius Robinson is a problem. I've really liked the way he's played these couple of games.
And I was sorry.
Who do you got? I mean, that's
I was going to throw out my guys, Tim Keenan, Tim Smith, and Overton. Like I mean,
was good.
it's not necessarily like there's that Dallas Turner, that guy who's going to be or Will Anderson, top 10 NFL draft pick. It's a lot of different guys that can really get after the passer. And where Alabama got burned against USF is not keeping Byron Brown in the pocket. And Byron Brown's a really good athlete, and he did a phenomenal job extending plays and using his legs. Tyler Van Dyke can't do that. And so if you're Alabama, you are pinning your ears back. You're not really giving a darn about Tyler Van Dyke getting outside the pocket because he hasn't really shown you that he can do all that much outside the pocket. This is probably the biggest advantage Alabama has. Getting after the passer against a quarterback that, one, has struggled under pressure during his career in terms of making the right decisions, but more importantly, hasn't really shown the ability to extend plays outside of the pocket.
Yeah, and then I think the last thing you're looking for is, can Wisconsin kind of get back to being a little bit more physical? I think last year it felt like a big problem. Their offensive line was great. I've kind of liked the way they've played these past couple of games. I thought, especially against Western Michigan, you saw some of the signs. I like the tackles. I love them all, and I think Jack Nelson can be a really good player. I think that'll be something I'm looking at, because obviously Western Michigan, Alabama aren't in the same world reality, and it wasn't something I thought Wisconsin did a great job of last year. But again, Luke Fickell, a guy who has kind of prided himself on being able to develop guys in the trenches and have really physical, tough teams. That'll be something, frankly. If Wisconsin can't get that going, and they're like, if they run the ball, it's a negative player, it's a stuff, that'll pretty much, I think, end this game. So I think at least bare minimum, they need to be able to run the ball a little bit, because if it's dropping back every play with
Tyler Van, yeah, it's gonna be a long. I would probably agree with that. All right, let's get to the pick. Big Ten boys picking an SEC Big Ten game. Dale, I'll go first. I'll put myself on the spot. I'm going to take Alabama in the points. I don't love it. I like going on the road to Camp Randall. It's a very hard place to play. But I think the way Alabama, and I feel like I've been taking a lot of favorites lately, but I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to take Alabama in the points. I just don't know. Like you kind of mentioned it. Can Wisconsin out physical Alabama? I don't think so. And so I think they can get after Tyler Van Dyke. I think there are things that they can do to move the football. And like really, Alabama's been moving the football. If it weren't for the penalties and the turnovers, like Alabama has a lot more than 42 points on the scoreboard. And so I'm going to go Alabama here with the points. I know it's over 2 touchdowns, but give me Alabama. What is it? What can I get? 15 points? I'm going to take it.
I actually kind of like Wisconsin outside that two touchdown spread, just because and a lot of it, frankly, has to do with if Caden Proctor's playing. Because if Caden Proctor's playing and they like very true offensive line out there, I don't really see much of a world that Alabama is stopped much by Wisconsin. But I think Wisconsin does have good enough edge rushers. I think Darrell Peterson, John Pierce have shown some good things. I think they can create some problems for these. Again, if they have to kind of roll these tackles and have Tyler Booker out there, have Pritchett and Formby alone, I think Wisconsin can do enough. I think they can hit explosive plays. I think Alabama, frankly, again, there have been some vulnerabilities in that secondary. I like the weapons that Wisconsin has more than I think a lot of people would think for a Wisconsin team.
Yeah, Will Pauling's a dude. I don't know if we said his name enough, but like
he can really play. So I think there's enough weaponry in this Wisconsin. I think if they can just hit a couple of big plays, this game probably doesn't blow out in the way I think people think. And also, I think Alabama's got to prove to me that against good or solid football teams that they can consistently march up and down the field. And I think, again, with the penalties you saw against USF, that question kind of remains.
Big time Homer Dale taking Wisconsin with the points. All right, we'll see how it plays out. We're going to break this one down Saturday afternoon. Appreciate you guys rocking with it again. Let it fly in the comment section. The boys are disagreeing. I'm sure there's going to be some disagreements in the comment section. We'll talk to y'all later.